Here we are again, all you wonderfully engaged educators, educational administrators, or education geeks just like me. Popular topics, technology. Well, today's big idea, tech literacy is a moral imperative. That's right, a moral imperative. I definitely think that the integration of technological attributes or tech aptitudes in every educational experience matters because of the technical skill sets that are important for individuals to acquire, understand. But it is essential for us as human beings to be very discerning in terms of how we are introducing and engaging with these technologies in our classrooms, because how we teach now is going to shape the kind of society we live in. And not to get too, Armageddon about it, but what impacts technology, challenging, negative, dangerous, could potentially have on our species in general. I really do believe that education is an immense tool, lever, cultural influencer. And if we can rethink what we teach, how we teach, and how we define and measure success, right? Our curriculum, our pedagogy, and our assessment are three big levers as educational designers, experienced designers. Then we have the potential to contribute to the manner in which humans and machines are operating in the world now, but more importantly, in the near future. So let's talk about the fact that digital tools are not neutral. Number one, the fact that informed citizens are the goal, not just skilled workers, to what I was just mentioning earlier about technical aptitudes versus moral imperative, and that human-centered technology starts, again, with us in the classroom and in educational experiences at home with our early parents and caregivers, and of course, within our social spheres outside of the educational classrooms. But we want to talk about the kind of positive impact that we can have as education revolutionaries. So let's focus on what we can do in our rooms, okay? So tools are not neutral. We have been having the huge discussion, obviously, recently around AI, algorithms, the implicit bias that is built into the data that is consumed by these large language models and then ultimately reproduced, repackaged in their outputs, which then people are taking as fact, copy and pasting, and so on. I don't think this started with AI, and I'm sure that there's anthropologists or those with anthropological backgrounds that could better articulate it, but no tool is neutral. It comes with responsibility. A hammer could be used to build a home. It could also be used to hurt somebody. So what education can do is help in designing a bit of an instruction manual. One of the reasons why in recent years, and I'm sure will continue in the near future, the emphasis on institutions and organizations to have an AI policy. Now, some have been very reactive and been very, we can never use this technology. It's very problem focused or operating. Some of those decisions that have been made around some of those policies in my decision have been very fear driven. So we need to understand that tools are not neutral, but we need to also understand our responsibility in helping to design an effective instruction manual for those interacting with those tools. In my opinion, it is not about barring something. It's about educating, opening the conversation, having discourse, having dialogue around the use cases and around the goal. So one of the things that we talk about a lot when I'm working with developers of courses is, what do you write in your syllabi? What do you talk about in week one? How do you first, of course, design assessments that are not easy to be AI, automation driven produced, right? Of course, we're going to talk about more about authentic assessments as we continue on this revolutionary ideas of 2025. But in terms of how AI will be used by your students, what you want to say as an educator, right? What matters to you in this course? It depends obviously a lot on your subject matter expertise. if you're working, in a computer science program versus working in a philosophy course, or teaching grade 3 as opposed to teaching grade 12. These things all matter. Who are you teaching? What are you teaching? Where are you teaching? When are you teaching? But the foundational point remains the same, that there needs to be a level of interaction, discussion, conversation, dialogue around instructive use, facilitated, guided use of tools that would be relevant to those people in those places, doing those things, applying the knowledge and skills they've acquired in this experience in the real world. And no matter what world we're living in, no matter what content you're teaching or what age you are, there is a level of technological interfacing, digital interfacing that will happen no matter your content. Whether you're having a philosophy discussion with your friends over WhatsApp on a chat, engaging, listening to podcasts or posting on Discord or creating TikTok videos, or creating reports and looking at large language models to help you create powerful introductory sentences, or an educator looking to leverage AI to get ideas on how to create more authentic assessment measures, for example, or designing a skills-based rubric, all of which that these tools can help you with, right? But they are not neutral. And we need to have conversations and to have a self-awareness and understand how we're using them, why we're using them, right? So this is a layer that we're adding to the curriculum. I want to emphasize here again, the human component of this is all hard work that we're doing as educators. I don't want to make this sound that I'm layering on like a whole additional curriculum to like already too much curriculum, already too many learning outcomes or learning objectives or documents that you have to account for and assess. Some of these skills and knowledge assets associated with the tech side of things could be assessed. Some of them don't have to be assessed, but they will be accounted for in your assessment structure for sure. But it's not about making more work. It's about looking at the reality. And there tends to be in these redesigns, like when you look at your learning experience and you look at what we were talking about last time around rethinking your subject matter and how people are engaging with it and how you're including representation and voice in your subject matter. And now asking the question of how am I understanding my audience and my content in such a way that I can better integrate the tools that they will be using anyways when they get out of this experience, or even while they're in this experience and producing assessments. If I can better understand that so that I can account for that and have conversations around that, your course is only going to be more meaningful and the learning going to be more deep, right? There are higher capital costs with some of this work. Looking at your learning design or a lesson plan or a workshop or your course planning worksheet for the whole year, maybe you're looking at it through a different lens, and that is there is a capital cost there. You spend a couple weeks with people talking about it, working it over, redesigning it, getting it to a new place, and then it's iterative, right? We prototype this stuff. It is not perfect. You try to do some of these things. You try to integrate some of these things, and then you do it and you see what worked, what landed, what didn't work. I still got a whole bunch of assessments that looked like they were just AI generated. Okay, so they're not neutral. We're here to help build a level of instruction around their use and integration within the classroom and recognizing their use cases outside of the classroom. Because why? That level of digital literacy, AI literacy is something that we can build on, right? And we can get even more relevant with when we start talking about other competency areas like digital citizenship. Huge one, right? Informed citizens, right? Not just skilled workers. And this idea of a human-centered classroom, this idea of being able to integrate with technology, use technology effectively, but also understand how we're different. And also manage data. Data is information, right? If we don't understand how to manage data, how to manage knowledge assets in an organization, every time somebody leaves a position, we have to start from scratch when we onboard the next position, because there's no easy to navigate archive of information or relevant real world scenarios or examples of what to do in this circumstance or situation, which would be useful to someone starting a position. That data has not been managed. And we can start looking at that skill set of data management in our formal education systems, even as early as elementary school curriculum. Yes, I do feel that tech literacy as a moral imperative, and then building on that with digital citizenship and data management, are all curricular skill and knowledge expectations that should exist at all levels of our education system. What's relevant to a grade 3 student is going to be different to what's relevant to a grade 11 student, which is going to be different to an adult learner in continuing studies. The development of a 9-year-old brain is different than the development of a 22-year-old brain. Still frontal lobe not developed. It always shocks me. 26, 27 years old, guys, are higher order functioning. Doesn't even finish developing yet. Side note. It looks different, 22-year-old brain, than it does in a 35-year-old's brain or a 44-year-old's brain, 44 proud. So what are relevant technical aptitudes? What is the most morally relevant and thus imperative to integrate will differ based on audience, age, context, and content, obviously. But if we move and layer onto this idea of digital AI literacy and we move on to this citizenship piece, we are talking about discernment. We're talking about decision-making, right? Informed decision-making, informed citizens. How are we making sure that we are not just raising, producing, teaching compliant users? The terms of agreement or terms of use, there's an amazing documentary on terms of use, agreeing to terms of use or something. I'm gonna look it up after we finish this one. But this idea of blindly checking those boxes, right? Like, I totally agree to signing my firstborn child away. We would never do that on contracts or on other certain written agreements that we seem to innately think are risky. But there is a lot of risky behavior that can happen online, as we all know, that far exceeds even, this idea of cyberbullying, but personal data protection and so on and so forth. There's a lot of curricular areas that we can look into once we start to dive further into this idea of relevant technical aptitudes and digital citizenship specifically under that umbrella. But what we need to be doing is, again, piggybacking off that idea that is as a moral imperative, even literacy is a conversational, discourse-based, dialogue-based endeavor in education, right? Where are we providing these spaces for us to interact and have these conversations? Even in asynchronous courses, I only see my students in the current course that I'm teaching 1 hour a week, live, synchronously. But there is rich dialogue and conversation around some very important topics, including the use of technology in assessment and evaluation, the use of AI, how measurement tools like using surveys are impacted, how we can mitigate bias in these ways, right? Conscious citizens start with an understanding that digital citizenship is a skills set priority, and that from a pedagogical standpoint, right? So we want to include conversations about some of the content around these areas and skills, offer opportunities, though, pedagogically for people to develop them through dialogue, through activities, through the assessment structures that we create in our courses. What we teach, how we define and measure success. Pull those levers to integrate digital literacy, digital citizenship, and data management. And in that way, we can integrate relevant technical aptitudes into our courses that are focused on a subject matter. And we can create human-centered, technologically enhanced educational experiences. Does someone think that's an oxymoron? Absolutely not. Human-centered, technology enhanced. Human-centered, technology enhanced. And it starts with us. Because if we don't take this seriously, layering our curriculum of technical aptitudes like literacy, citizenship, and management into our course experiences today, in whichever way is the lowest hanging fruit for you, and build from there, then we are not taking advantage of our potential influence on the world that we live in tomorrow and our relationship ultimately between humans and machines. Yeah, we're that important. We're that important, everybody. Educators, educational administrators, education geeks, relevant technical aptitudes. Let's double click, as it were, on the human-centered part of that phrase next time, talking about essential human competencies and adding that layer onto our subject matter expertise. Don't worry, it's the last layer, okay? Capital costs, low operating costs, more meaningful, more deep learning experiences. It's a revolutionary, everybody. See you next time. The Education Revolution podcast is produced in-house by community members, and I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Sangera. Thank you for listening to this week's episode, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and head over to my website to opt in for my newsletter for more ways to connect with some of these big ideas.